So I think where we are really sensitive is around our real-time data that drives price discovery and trading. That really is a core function of an exchange. We're the only people that have that data. Therefore, we need to be very reasonable or responsible rather around how we price that data. But once that data is out in the public domain, anything that is done on top of that is completely competitive.
Hello and welcome to this latest episode of ITWeb TV on the road. I'm joining you today from ITWeb's Cloud and Data Center Summit here in Johannesburg. I'm joined by Mark Randall, who is Director of Information Services at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, or JSE, I think it's more commonly known as. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Adrian. It's a pleasure to be here.
Lovely to have you. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, so let's start. Let's give our viewers a bit of an overview about the stock exchange, specifically the JSE, how long you've been in operation, perhaps how the market's changed more recently. There's obviously been a few competitors kind of launched. And then I think let's look into the cloud and stuff after that.
Yeah, 100%.
If you can just set the scene, tell us about the JSE and some of your competitors.
No, will do, thank you. So the JSE has been around since 1887, believe it or not, so that's a long time. I haven't been around that long, thankfully, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of history there. I think the exchange probably does a few key things in South Africa. It helps companies to raise money, to invest into their businesses and to grow their businesses, but also provides a really credible, trusted platform for investors to come and invest their money. That may be pension funds, it may be life companies, it may be retail investors, it may be foreigners. And really when people are trading on an exchange, buying shares, buying bonds, buying derivatives, they really want to make sure that they're at a place where they're going to get their stock, where their money will settle, where there's credibility and transparency and good governance. And really an exchange's role in the modern world is to really run an infrastructure, a utility almost, that is really about making sure that trading is clean, that it's credible, that it's trusted. I think in terms of the landscape, historically you'll find that most countries or regions have got some kind of stock market exchange, and South Africa is no different. Ours has been around for a long time. I think globally what we find is that the JSE is competing for listings, for listed companies, and for allocation of capital with all sorts of other exchanges. Not everybody wants to invest in South Africa. We compete with other emerging market countries for foreign flows. We compete with global markets for South African flows. And of course, within South Africa, this is a competitive landscape. There are other exchanges. Some of them compete directly on price, and some of them list sort of more niche companies that target different types of shareholders. So it really is quite a vibrant ecosystem. But at the end of the day, I think what people want is exchange they can trust, and where there's no concern around whether the transaction will settle or whether there's any governance concerns.
Sure. Okay. So I think one of the interesting things about stock exchanges is obviously that kind of Hollywood idea of people running in and with tickets and all those things. But I'm sure technology's moved the stock exchanges on massively since then. So maybe let's look at your kind of how technology has evolved within stock exchanges in general. You're here today at the summit to talk around something specifically within your cloud environment. But maybe if you can just give us an overview of how the JSE's adopted cloud and where you are on your cloud journey. And perhaps some of the challenges you've faced, how things have evolved over recent years.
Yeah, Adrian. So I think every modern exchange is actually a tech company at its heart. Really, what you're offering is a matching engine, a trading engine, where people and brokers can come and submit bids and offers, and there's some sort of auction process or reported trade process. All of that runs on technology. So we don't have any human being traders standing in a pit waving bits of paper anymore, although it is very exciting to watch. There are one or two exchanges that still do that, I think just for all time's sake. But certainly in South Africa, all of our trading is electronic. That means we don't even have any brokers in our building. They're all connected into our data center. All of our core technology runs on premises in our data center, and we require our brokers to connect to that. And that's really world-class technology. I think the focus there on latency, on speed to connect, on reliability of packets is something that really drives the core exchange business. We've seen some exchanges start to really grapple with is it possible to move exchange matching engines into the cloud. That's not something that's been cracked at scale yet, but there is a lot around the periphery where it does make a lot of sense to move to cloud. So in my space, I really look after our data business at the exchange, which really, when you think about it, is the lifeblood of trading. Any trader that puts in a bid or offer needs to know where the current price is, where other people are trading, where the last price is, what the intraday volatility looks like. So the ability to get data out in real time, sub-microsecond, to everybody on an even playing field is really what the technology is about. That's on the day. Of course, when you get to the next day, T+1 and beyond, there are all sorts of use cases around research, around analytics, around compliance, risk reporting, performance management, index calculation. These are all use cases where really getting the exchange's data into your system and running it becomes essential. So I think where exchanges and the JSE in particular are spending a lot of energy is to say, how do we take a really close look at our data infrastructure that used to be either real-time, low latency, or FTP, basically, and evolve that in such a way that we can serve up some of these use cases, that we can meet our clients where they're upgrading their infrastructure and processes, and really get them to data through the cloud, improve some of those cost profiles, improve some of the quality profiles, and really just automate the process end-to-end to technology out the system. So that's where a lot of energy is going. Of course, like any organization, we're moving some of our applications into the cloud. Those are probably more internal and productivity related rather than sort of trading and client facing. But I think really what makes the exchange business unique in the cloud space is this concept of how do we channel data, and in particular real-time data, through the cloud hyperscalers.
Okay. I remember there being some kind of tale some years ago about traders wanting to be kind of as close to the service as possible to reduce the latency, and then there had to be some kind of standardization to make sure that everyone's on a fair and equal footing. How does that kind of work in your world? Is that something that is an issue, or is that something that's been resolved?
No, it's absolutely a real thing, and believe it or not, when you're measuring at that level of microsecond, the length of the network cable does matter.
Okay.
So effectively what we do, like many exchanges do, is we have something called a co-location area in our data center, and really clients can come and put their racks in a co-located space with our matching engine server. I think what's important there is we ensure that the cabling is exactly the same length, that the power is the same, that everybody's on a level playing field. That is the lowest latency trading profile you will get, because it's physically the closest to the trading engine. And that's really where we see a lot of the intraday trading, where people are really sensitive about very short-term, very low latency price movements. So that's a business that's tricky to move into the cloud, because you can't replicate all of that technology in exactly the same way just yet. Although the hyperscalers are working very hard on this, there have been some very public, high-profile partnerships announced between some of the big global exchanges. But I think for now, that's a business that we think will continue to live on rather in our co-located data center. That doesn't mean everybody's trading out of there. There are people that have got different latency profiles that are trading for different purposes, or don't need the data for real-time trading at all, and really it doesn't make sense for them to connect through colo because of the cost implications and the redundancy and everything that goes with that. So they can settle for a slightly lower quality service, and that's really where we're thinking about how can cloud help to reduce ecosystem costs.
Okay. It's a slight curveball. We'll come on to your kind of marketplace in a minute. But one thing that I was kind of interested in and thought about with all of the data that's available, and I'm sure like we're as a community, as a society, civilization, are suddenly so hot on generative AI. But I'm sure AI has been kind of used by exchanges and traders for a long time. So how is that has there been a significant change over the past 2 years that you've experienced within the kind of the exchange environment? Or is it just, it's always been there, it's kind of been evolving at a steady pace all the time?
Well, I think AI generally, if you kind of think about RPA and ML, some of those things certainly have been evolving steadily over a number of years, really for productivity gains and some of the modeling. One thing that's maybe quite important from an exchange's perspective is because we're a market operator, we can't provide one client with something and not provide it to a different client. So the exchange is never going to be in the space of making stock picks or stock selections or generating any kind of secret source whatsoever.
Sure.
And that's really important just from a client fairness and credibility point of view. So yes, I think a lot of our brokers and investors are looking very carefully around what kind of alpha can they generate, how can they compete against other market players to, make a few more cents on every trade. And I is absolutely a part of that. I think with the exchange as a role to play is how do we make sure that the data that you're using for your AI models is AI ready? And that's a space where I spend a lot of my time thinking about, to say, why do I need every player to worry about data quality and getting the right amount of history and making sure it's in a query-ready format and storing it on the cloud and everything that you'd expect, managing metadata, managing data governance and all of those things. So I think increasingly the exchanges are saying, hang on a second, AI is changing the way that people engage with our data, right? And we can reduce some costs out of the ecosystem by doing some things at the center at scale, rather than getting every single user to do that themselves. So that's the way I think about AI from a public market data client perspective. But yes, certainly everyone I talk to is spending a lot of energy thinking about at a trade level, investment level, or a portfolio level, what difference does AI make? You'll see this even in the retail space. You can now buy into funds, ETFs that are AI focused. There are some active funds that are using AI stock selection. So it is starting to permeate the industry, and I think we'll continue to do so.
Okay, cool. So the real reason you're here today at the Cloud Summit is to talk around something that the JSE is introducing. You'll clarify, which is your cloud marketplace. Yeah. So can you give me a bit more information on what that is, what was the idea behind it, and what sort of services are available through it?
Absolutely, will do. So probably about 3 years ago, I think from a strategic point of view, we really had a long, hard look at where our data business was going. We do sell data. It forms a chunky part of our annual revenue, and obviously that data is used across the ecosystem. But I think it was very clear to us, and what our clients were telling us, is that there were things that we had to invest in to make them better. Flexibility of data, access to history, better metadata management, being able to serve new use cases. And what we find largely is that in the exchange world, we have this concept of data vendors or data aggregators that really get data from lots of sources and deliver those to end clients, do normalization and so on. That obviously adds a layer of costs. Sometimes these are offshore players, so they get charged in dollars. Rand weakness could be against you. So really our clients are asking us, the JSE, can you provide us data in new formats? Different formats and perhaps in different locations. And this is what triggered our data infrastructure modernization journey, which we have embarked on and are executing on Azure as our preferred cloud partner in the data space. So we've done a few things. We have moved all of our data at rest out of our transactional systems and copied that into the cloud in a storage that's really dedicated to data delivery and analytics. If you think about it, we run 6 different markets. Each of them is an application for trading, for clearing, for billing, for reference data management. There are many, many applications, all of them world class, none of them particularly designed well for data extraction and data analytics. So we said, no, we can do this better by really dedicating some infrastructure to this. We've completed that move of all of our end-of-day data into the cloud. And what we focus on this year really is how do we change the way we deliver that data to our clients. Okay. Into the marketplace. The marketplace is basically intended to create a self-service portal, for lack of a better word, that a client can come into, see the full catalog of data that's available to them, understand what they've already bought as a company, because this may surprise you, but one person on one desk may not know what someone on the other desk has bought. Sure. And they will typically buy it again, which is a real problem. Understand what history is availability, what the quality of that product is, what the use cases are that you're allowed to do with that data, contract for the product and receive the entitlement to go and download the data. They would then come into our cloud tenant and basically be entitled to get that data on either a pull API to get the data directly in some kind of query-ready format, or else a push API, particularly for our streaming feeds or real-time or delayed feeds. So the marketplace really, I think, is our first stab at saying, how do we take a process that used to be fundamentally manual end-to-end, from looking at a price list in PDF to understanding what you've contracted for, to engage with the data procurement teams and going to legal and so on. Very lengthy, very manual, very painful. And how do we put all of that workflow back in the hands of the client? to say you don't have to speak to our team. Our team doesn't have to do anything manually in terms of enablement. Come in, buy what you need, get the entitlement, and get out. So it's really about flexibility. It's about speed. It's about convenience. At the moment, the marketplace is really aimed more at our business clients. Rather than retail clients. Typically, a lot of retail customers would get this data from their brokers or from their banks or from the media, and that's the piece that we're kind of automating right now. Whether there's a need to expand that into the broader retail market, we'll consider over time, but certainly for now we're looking where the high volume wholesale delivery is, and that's what the marketplace is all about.
Okay. And are you finding that it's kind of changing how clients are interacting with you? Like, are there some clients that are taking it on board more fully and like changing their own operating models as a result, or is everyone kind of adopting it wholesale in the same way?
It's pretty new. This was an H2 launch this year, so we're still spending a lot of time talking to clients. I think we've seen 2 use cases so far. I think the first one is clients that are ex-South Africa, that really the geographical delivery across as your backbone makes life much easier for them than coming to South Africa, establishing a presence, getting all the connectivity done. So we're seeing a lot of interest from those clients to switch on their services from sort of the legacy connectivity to the cloud connectivity to save costs. I think where the real exciting piece is probably our domestic industry, where our clients are looking to upgrade or modify their own workflows. Now there it becomes a question of prioritization. And we've only moved a very small fraction of our data products onto the cloud. We've really kind of done 2 or 3 of each category, sort of real-time streaming, end-of-day, intraday, and so on. And our conversation now with the clients is to say, we've got this connectivity, it's open for business, we can scale new product really rapidly. Tell us where your next horizon of upgrade is, and we will make sure that we can deliver you the data the way that you need it, as opposed to you having to rebuild what you have against our legacy stack. So we think that's going to steer our priority really as clients look to upgrade their own processes. But over time, yes, we would expect to move everybody off our legacy platforms onto the new Azure platform.
Okay. And did you, I mean, this is always the hard question, probably the easy question to ask, the hard question to answer, but did you face any challenges when you kind of introduced it? Were there any kind of, I mean, obviously there's going to be issues around data security, I'm sure, compliance, change management, and that's probably something that you're going through currently with clients. But what were the issues you faced, and how have you overcome them, and or going about overcoming them?
There are always issues. I think any sizable IT project is going to have issues, and I think at the same time, capital investment is scarce. So whilst we need to make sure we are maintaining our trading engines and clearing platforms, there's not always enough money left to invest at the speed that you want to invest to, I guess. So I think for our data strategy, we've taken quite a low risk approach of saying, let's not fiddle with the engine that's currently running. And we've really been very intentional about trying to spin up something adjacent, even though it's the same data, different connectivity, potentially some different pricing, different contracting, different architecture, so that we are not forcing our clients with a hard date to say you have to switch from this delivery to that delivery. So that's been a key criteria for us. I think, obviously there's challenges around making sure we are complying with governance standards. Maybe less importantly for most of our data, which is public in nature, as opposed to confidential proprietary data. So it does help that we really focus in on the public data rather than confidential data. It's still in country largely. We're leaving the golden source within our transactional systems. So it's not a case of we're deleting any of the original stuff that's working with the metadata management and compliance and lineage there. But I think maybe one of the interesting channels is to some extent the industry is really evolving in real time. Okay. So what we sort of designed a year ago, we know 10% of that won't be valid in a year's time, or 20%, or whatever that number is. So it's around getting a team on board that is really comfortable with innovating, comfortable with trying new things, comfortable with funding that, and how do you think about that from a budget point of view, and really comfortable saying, how do you go to a client and say, well, we've done this much, the rest we can't do unless we can wire it directly into you. So what do you want? What is your story? What vendors are you using? I think partner selection has been really important for us. I think 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we would have said, don't worry, we can build all of this ourselves. Absolutely not the case, I think, anymore in anything, particularly technology.
Yeah.
So finding best-of-class partners in cloud, in analytics, in marketplace and licensing has really unlocked some of the delivery for us, because we're going to have to lean on our own school fees, if you like, to build that capacity. And then maybe the last challenge is the internal narrative. Ultimately, we need to make some revenue with these data sales, right? So at some point, the revenue needs to exceed the investment, so you can show some profit for shareholders. Obviously, we're very responsible about how we do that. We are in a regulated space, but you're not going to get that in your first couple of years. So the way to really map out to say, what will this cost us? What do cloud costs look like? Or what the license cost looks like? At what point? How many customers we need? How do we price the new connectivity? That kind of financial modeling is really a three-way conversation, I think, between the JSE, between our tech providers, and between our clients, all within the ambit of an annual listed company reporting cycle. So I think a lot to work with, and certainly not something we could do in isolation.
Okay. And then I think my last question is probably around, you've kind of talked, I don't know whether you've mentioned it today or whether it's kind of been something that I picked up from our kind of conference agenda, but it said that this was the first phase of the market data modernization strategy. So what are the next phases? What's that kind of journey? How long is that journey expected to take? What's involved?
Absolutely. So I think in the medium term, let's call that 18 months, more or less, I think it's important for us that whatever you can get through our legacy stack, we can replicate on our cloud stack. Now, a lot of those recipes we've created already, so it's really just a case of guiding through the content and making sure we've got all 6 of our markets, all of our data products, all of our real-time data available on the cloud platform. That's more or less in hand. The team is running with it. We've done the funding, we've done the design work. I think the 2 bits that excite me, I think the first one is around where does the platform go from here. We do think that there's a potential demand for third-party data assets, in other words, non-JSE data, on the platform. JSE obviously has got really good experience at running a data utility, delivery, governance, billing, operations, quality, all the things that you'd expect. At the same time, we've got entrenched sort of procurement relationships across the ecosystem, banks, sell side, buy side, people that are already taking our data. So we think the ability to crowd in other data assets that we don't have to own or endorse, and offer that as a platform service to other data owners, I think is really exciting. Some of our clients are saying there's benefit to them to get it in one place, on one contract, on one connectivity, on one support model. And of course, not everybody that owns data, they may know it's valuable, but they may not know how to monetize it. Right. So to offer that as a service in the capital market space is very, very exciting. And then I think the other piece that's exciting is really around analytics. Okay. And what is the exchange's role, whether that's AI or Gen AI or something maybe more capital market specific. Traditionally, we've been largely a wholesale play in terms of data, but in the same way that we can scale or create ecosystem scale at source by doing things that are really commoditized, we think the same applies for analytics. So we've done a first version of this with our equity market trading members to roll out an analytics platform for them. It looks at ranking, analytics, market share, execution quality, and so on. And we really think that there's an opportunity to do that for the broader market. That may be buy-side and investor relations, or investor relations. It may be all sorts of other data. But really just saying, what is it that everybody is doing, right? And why are they doing it? And can't we bring that to source, do it ourselves, and release all of those specialists in the market to go back to make our own secret source? That's really the vision of analytics stream.
Okay. Is there some kind of, you mentioned earlier about kind of being fair to all players.
Yes.
If you're kind of adding analytics into that, would there be kind of additional costs? Like if you're selling certain levels of analytics, I suppose, is that seen as fair that you're, like, if I'm better resourced than my neighbor, I can buy more stuff and like do better?
Yep.
And that's within like your mandate and your kind of...
So I think where we are really sensitive is around our real-time data that drives price discovery and trading. That really is a core function of an exchange. We're the only people that have that data. Therefore, we need to be very reasonable or responsible rather around how we price that data. But once that data is out in the public domain, Anything that is done on top of that is completely competitive.
Right. Okay.
Once we publish that data, there's no public data point that we have that a competitor doesn't have.
Sure.
Right. So on a purely commercial point of view, that means if we can't do it cheaper or better, then we won't get the business. There's no regulatory mandate to use the JSE for anything other than trading.
Okay.
And even then, there's competition. So I'm not worried about that from an analytics point of view. I think what we are very excited about, though, is our ability to democratize access to some of these analytics. So certainly there are players out there that can't afford, to spin up a team, to pay the capex, to do all of this themselves, and being able to get that from someone credible that doesn't have a pure profit incentive at source on a subscription basis. I think we've seen already in our equity broker space provide some access to this kind of tooling that really closes some of the barriers that these guys would have seen compared to the bigger players.
Yeah.
So we do think we've got a market health role to say, how do we help democratize data, how do we help democratize analytics, make sure access is easy, access is fairly priced. So exciting times.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. That's been awesome. Really insightful. That was Mark Randall, who is the Director of Information Services at the JSE. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe this episode if you've enjoyed it. Thank you.